transforms into ground zero for an international health emergency. We're talking about the MV Hondius, a Dutch-flagged luxury cruise ship that had just sailed out of Argentina. Now you might be wondering, how exactly does an isolated medical incident out at sea spiral into a massive geopolitical crisis involving international borders and the biggest health organizations on the planet?
Well, to understand that, we have to look at the timeline, because things escalated unbelievably fast. On April 6, 2026, an adult male on board developed pretty standard symptoms, a fever or a headache, but by April 11th, he was in severe respiratory distress and tragically passed away on the ship. As the crew scrambled to find a port, a close contact of his also deteriorated rapidly during a medical evacuation flight and died. It actually wasn't until May 2nd that labs in South Africa finally cracked the code and confirmed what they were dealing with, a hantavirus infection.
The human toll on the MV Hondius was absolutely devastating. By early May, out of the passengers affected, 8 total cases were reported, with 5 of those officially confirmed as hantavirus, and this terrifying little cluster claimed 3 lives. When you think about the confined, shared spaces of a cruise ship, it was just incredibly lethal rapid spread.
Now, what makes this so much worse is the specific virus involved. The WHO Director General confirmed this was the Andes hantavirus. And why does that matter? Because the Andes strain is literally the only species of hantavirus we know of that is capable of human-to-human transmission, specifically through close, prolonged contact. A luxury cruise ship is basically the perfect incubator for that kind of contact, right? It turned a rare pathogen into an absolute nightmare scenario.
All right, moving to Section 1, zooming out. The geopolitical row. Because this story absolutely does not end on the deck of the MV Hondius. Let's shift our focus from this micro-crisis on the ship to the macro-crisis blowing up on land, specifically in Argentina, where the cruise originally set sail.
See, health authorities in Argentina were simultaneously fighting a massive, intense battle on their own soil. They were facing their absolute worst hantavirus season in recent memory. Just look at the data here. During the 2024-2025 season, they had 57 confirmed cases. But in the current season, that number surged to 101. So they were battling this huge domestic spike at the exact same moment the cruise ship incident blew up in the international headlines.
And boom, this biological crisis instantly sparked a massive diplomatic firestorm. On one side, you have Argentina, who actually formally withdrew from the WHO over this, accusing the organization of heavily politicizing the outbreak. They claim the WHO was exploiting the infections to try and influence a sovereign decision. On the flip side, the WHO firmly maintained that their coordinated response was just standard, necessary procedure, arguing that it proves why we desperately need global solidarity against cross-border health threats.
That brings us to Section 2, another crisis, high pathogenicity, avian influenza. It really shows how a localized biological threat quickly stresses the whole international system. But watch how this builds into an even larger global issue when we pivot to a completely different biological enemy currently sweeping the globe.
173 million. Let that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering amount of birds affected by high pathogenicity avian influenza, or HPI, in the US alone since February 2022. We are literally talking about hundreds of commercial and backyard flocks just completely devastated by an unprecedented viral spread.
And the ripple effects of an outbreak this massive, they're global. It's not just about the birds, it's about massive trade disruptions. Major markets like China, the EU, and Japan have suspended imports. And that directly drives this wild volatility you're seeing in your grocery bill for poultry and eggs. But here's the really alarming part. In March 2024, this avian virus actually transmitted to U.S. dairy cattle. Wait, cows? Yes, cows. It's showcasing an evolving epidemiology that is now threatening completely new agricultural sectors.
So we've got an Andes hantavirus outbreak stemming from South America, and a bird flu crisis totally disrupting global food supplies and crossing over into dairy herds. It prompts a pretty critical question, right? What on earth does a lethal virus on a cruise ship actually have in common with the price of a carton of eggs at your local supermarket?
Well, it all comes down to the root causes. Just like the Argentine Ministry of Health pointed out, the primary driver here is our increasing daily human interaction with wild environments. Whether we're talking about hantavirus or avian flu, the scientific battlefield is exactly the same. Climate change, intense flooding, habitat destruction, and rural expansion. We are literally shifting where these pathogens exist and basically putting ourselves directly in their path.
Look at this breakdown. Roughly 60% of all emerging pathogens are zoonotic, meaning they jump from animals directly to humans.
And of that 60% slice, over 70% originates specifically from wildlife. Our changing, complicated relationship with nature, our constant encroachment into wildlife habitats, that is the fundamental engine driving these biological crises. Which leads us to Section 3, the unified solution. If the root causes of all this are interconnected, the solution obviously has to be as well. Let's look at the modern framework that global health experts have designed to try and prevent these intertwined crises from tearing through our populations and our economies.
It's known as the One World, One Health framework. The core idea here is that we can no longer afford to treat human medicine, veterinary science, and environmental conservation like they are separate, isolated fields. They are all parts of a single, giant puzzle. This framework recognizes the inextricable link among human, animal, and ecosystem health. Basically, if one sector is sick, we all are.
I want to read this quote from the Ottawa Charter for Health Promotion because I think it hits the nail right on the head. Reciprocal maintenance, taking care of each other, our communities, and our natural environment. It underscores a very literal, urgent truth. Protecting our natural environment is no longer just some nice idea about conservation. It is quite literally an act of self-preservation to protect human health.
So this completely shifts our global strategy. Think about it. The traditional approach was totally reactive. We'd wait for an outbreak to happen and then desperately try to fight the fire within our own borders. But the One World, One Health approach, it's a complete 180. It focuses on upstream prevention. It requires actual international cooperation to spot the spillover of a virus way before it becomes a deadly crisis on a luxury cruise ship or wipes out our commercial poultry supply.
Now, if you're sitting there wondering, why do we really need to invest in this huge proactive approach? Just look at the staggering economic cost of being unprepared. These are massive, brutal financial hits. SARS, a disease that originated in wildlife, cost the global economy up to $50 billion. Mad cow disease? That was $6.3 billion. Investing in environmental health isn't just good science anymore. It is going to save us billions of dollars and, much more importantly, countless human lives.
Make no mistake, this ongoing struggle against zoonotic diseases, from the Hantavirus tragedy on the MV Handias to the bird flu disrupting our global food chains, is a high-stakes, literal global battle. We are fighting a war against emerging pathogens, and it requires serious coordination from international leaders, the scientific community, and everyday people to defend our health and our economies. What do you think about this war? What impact